Welcome. I'm Steve Clemons, editor-at-large of The Hill. Thanks so much for joining us for our Small Business Summit. Over the next 2 hours, we're going to be exploring the challenges facing today's small businesses and what the future holds for business owners across this country. Before we begin, we'd like to thank our sponsor, Alibaba, for its support of today's conversations. We'll hear from key policymakers, business owners, and economic experts today on the most pressing issues and opportunities in our current small business landscape. As we often hear, small businesses are the backbone of the American economy. But the COVID-19 pandemic has been especially tough on many, forcing about 1/3 to temporarily or permanently close. That's a lot of businesses. What are policymakers doing to connect entrepreneurs and small business owners with the resources they need to recover and hopefully to prosper? How is technological innovation helping us navigate this new world of remote work, online hiring, and global connectedness? And how has the pandemic affected labor and staffing? We're going to ask our guests these questions and many more this afternoon. But before we begin, I've got a few housekeeping notes. Please tweet us at The Hill Events using the hashtag #TheHillSmallBiz. We're broadcasting live, and we'll take your questions throughout the program. And this is my favorite part. As with any live stream, you could experience occasional trouble with the video. Refreshing the page should, in most cases, fix the problem. I'm going to keep refreshing my page. Joining me now to discuss how the federal government is helping small businesses on the road to recovery is Mark Madrid. He's the Associate Administrator for the Office of Entrepreneurial Development at the U.S. Small Business Administration. Mark, thanks so much for joining us today. Look, I think one of the purposes of today's program, and I think you're right on top of it, is to get the pulse of small business in America. And I sometimes hate saying the word small business because a lot of small businesses want to be big businesses, or they're in this different world of ventures. And I know that you head this Office of Entrepreneurial Development. And I'd love to get just a snapshot from you of what's going well in the U.S. economy right now and what are the troubled parts from your perspective.
Well, thank you. First of all, it's the highest honor imaginable to serve small businesses across the U.S. and Puerto Rico and our U.S. territories. And Steve, I would just like to say that as early as this morning at 5 a.m., when I was working out, and I asked someone in the fitness industry, an entrepreneur, how are you feeling? Just that basic question, how are you feeling? And what he said was two things. Number one, I'm hopeful, but I'm also terrified. I'm hopeful in terms of how I've pivoted, how I've transformed into more of a digital environment, but I'm also terrified that this place, this gym, might be subject to, what I experienced last year around this time. And so what I would say is we definitely are inspired by the fact that there was 3 million new business applications in the first half of 2021, but also we want to keep an empathy type of chord with our small business owners, truly understanding, meeting them where they are. I always like to say I'd like to have ears like an elephant, not a hippo. In other words, we've got to listen. And that's exactly what we're doing under the bold leadership and action-oriented leadership of SBA Administrator Guzman.
I'm going to have to check in with you on what that gym is. My gym, I have a gym I've just rejoined. I'm trying to get back in shape, and I run on these machines, and you have the mask on. I'm like, trying to figure out how to do it. So I want these folks to stay open, and I want to get to the other side of this. But listen, I think another dimension, I'm really intrigued with this program you run, the Community Navigator program. And I go out and I talk to small businesses as well. And, I'm really fascinated. I mean, look, I want to be honest with everybody. Not everybody has made it through the pandemic. There have been some really, really tough situations for folks. But there's also a lot of businesses who have innovated. They found export markets. They went online. I'm just pointing my computer here. They went very digital, found ways to do this. And I've talked to hundreds of these folks. But tell me about the Navigator program, because it sounds like that's competency building and that's helping folks get resources they might not otherwise have had.
Absolutely, Steve. And President Biden a couple of weeks ago announced his COVID-19 action plan. And within that framework were 3 important points on behalf of the SBA. And that was our work with the EIDL program, which I can explain and here in a moment. It's the Economic Injury Disaster Loan. Also our efforts on forgiveness in terms of streamlining and making it more accessible. And the Community Navigator pilot, which was enacted with the American Rescue Plan Act of 2021. And the whole essence of that, Steve, is to ensure that we're truly connecting small business owners with federal, state, and local resources, and more awareness, frankly, and application of SBA resources, funding, and programmatic elements like educational components. And that is truly going to take us to the next step in terms of what Administrator Guzman talks about, making this SBA more customer-centric, technology-forward, advancing equity. And the whole premise is to use a hyper-local approach to supporting our small businesses, especially the ones that were left behind from pandemic resourcing, and some of which have been left behind historically. We're talking about women, veterans, socially and economically disadvantaged individuals that own these businesses, both in rural and urban America. So a hyper-local approach using community navigators, and we refer to these navigators, and all they are is community champions. They're the ones that truly know that business, what they've been through. They know why there's caution tape on the restroom. They know why that owner is going through their certain struggles. They know the financial history, and that's been built upon trust and being culturally competent. And so we're relying on those community champions, those community navigators, with this $100 million granting opportunity. And we're so fortunate at the Office of Entrepreneurial Development on behalf of the SBA to be, we will be announcing those grantees in the fall of 2021. So it's going to be an exciting announcement. We're going to see geographical diversity. We're going to see several segments of our small business community served from this endeavor, which is going to be a national endeavor with a hyper-local approach. And Administrator Guzman often states that small businesses are the giants of our economy, and we are definitely going to underscore that with this effort.
I mean, I think that's clearly true. I mean, I think people underestimate sometimes how vital small business is, and jobs, employment, risk-taking, entrepreneurship, new creation of just across the board. But one of the things I think is interesting, Mark, I'd just love to get your take on it and find out where the SBA is helping any of these small businesses in your purview not only go hyper-local and do business with folks in their community and down the street or in their state, but we've all gone digital. I mean, we've seen the sweep of everything we do go into the digital space, and I've seen so many firms that are now engaged with an international orientation and looking at what's going on. I mean, we used to just call it exports, but I'm not sure if it's really technically an export. You're selling stuff, but you're reaching somebody you might not otherwise have reached, in Asia, in Europe, but abroad, online with these new platforms. And so I'm just wondering, is the SBA and are you folks, as you kind of orient folks, helping them to understand if their services or their products are appropriate? There's a whole nother set of consumers out there globally.
Absolutely. We're fortunate that Administrator Guzman is leading the SBA because she has had quite an experience on the ground, and also from a strategic standpoint with transformation digitally. And I can tell you that that's the case here. I recall at the outbreak of the pandemic, a woman entrepreneur from the West Coast, she called me and she said, "Mark, we lost 90% of our revenue in 1 week."
Wow.
And I don't know what we're going to do. And literally, she had her infant daughter, one arm. She had, I think, 3 cell phones, and 2 of which were ringing at the same time while she was having this conversation with me. And I thought, my goodness, my heart just went out to her. I mean, this was in probably April of 2020. All this entrepreneur did was transform digitally. She was B2B at that time. She was actually procuring coffee products at high-tech firms. And so when the high-tech firms, rolled into a virtual workplace, that's when she transformed. And here's the secret sauce here. She paired up with another woman entrepreneur. And that woman entrepreneur was able to collectively with the ambitions and the vision of this woman entrepreneur in the coffee business, said, let's transform your B2B business to a B2C business. And all she did was to be featured on Good Morning America. The reason I bring that up is because there's an international component to that digital transformation, and that was involving coffee farmers in Central and South America. So I hope that brings the point home. And Administrator Guzman is definitely interested. We have an Office of International Trade here, also an Office of Investment and Innovation, which brings me to the point is that we're breaking silos, that we've got to work across the units, Office of Entrepreneurial Development, with all of our units here at the SBA.
You know, you are bouncing out of your chair. You're so excited. I want to get to that in just a second. But, you know, Mark, I also want to say that you were CEO of the Latino Business Action Network before you came into this position. I've worked a lot with the U.S. Hispanic Chamber of Commerce. I work with Hispanic business across this nation. I'm always impressed. But there's another side of the story, which is a lot of black and brown-owned businesses in America were not at the front of the line when PPP was distributed. They were not on the front of the line of some opportunity. So it's always kind of like a tale of two cities, you know, in my mind, as I, you know, meet folks like you. I'm just blown away. But I also know there are a lot of people who feel left out. How are we doing in reaching a broader equation, if you will, of participants in business that may not have gotten these resources before? What more do we need to do to make sure that we're completely inclusive?
That is the heart of the issue here. Administrator Guzman and all of us here at the SBA, we are devout and unrelenting on advancing equity. And what you saw in the second draw of PPP was more access through PPP enhancements, the streamlining of the forgiveness process, especially for the lower funding amounts. And so that was, walking the talk. And now with the Community Navigator pilot, we have that same premise, is that we have to focus on those businesses that were left behind or that were not at the front of the line, frankly. And so that's what we intend to do through action. And the two examples that I put out there is the second draw PPP, and I added a P there, but PPP in terms of you saw a predominance of lower funding amounts that meant the smallest of the small. And then, frankly, attached to that was making sure that those small funding amounts, smaller,
right,
relatively speaking, were forgiven. And so with the Advent Community Navigator pilot, our geographical diversity, that's a very important component to this equation. Whether we're talking about the economic injury disaster loan, which is, we've had enhancements there in terms of the loan that is available. I'd love to talk to you about that. We're going to keep our eye on the ball on that one in terms of increasing equity and access when it comes to funding, programming, and future products here at the SBA. You can count on it.
We're definitely going to ask you back so we can continue that conversation. But look, I got to slip in one personal thing, which I was very touched by, and I, just by reading it. I know your small business hero was your dad. Any thoughts you want to share with people about him, these times, what he did, and how he's inspired you to be such an engine in this small business arena?
You got me there. I wouldn't be here without my father. And I was not raised in an academic household. I was raised in the Texas Panhandle. And if we were in person, you'd see my boots here. My dad was a migrant farm worker. That's how he met my mother on the cotton fields. And when he said, "No more, that's not my destiny," he picked up trades. He was resourceful, industrious, and he opened his welding business that he had for over 40 years and became known as the go-to welder in the Texas Panhandle and the South Plains. And that industrious spirit, that entrepreneurial spirit, I have it in my DNA. And it means so much to be here because we lost my father to COVID-19 back in the summer of 2020. I almost lost my mother. In fact, the last time my mother saw my dad was on the COVID floor. And I didn't get to see my father because I was in California with the Latino Business Action Network and Stanford Latino Entrepreneurship Initiative, and they were in Abilene, Texas. So when I say it's the highest honor imaginable to serve U.S. small businesses, it's from the heart, and I'm just energized to be here. But I pair that energy with empathy, which means that we have an ongoing concern here. And although we're serving over 31 million small businesses under, Administrator Guzman's leadership, we have to, make it personal in terms of thinking about. I tell the team here at OED, the Office of Entrepreneurial Development, think of at least 3 small business owners today.
Yeah.
And that's important that we do that every single day, and we will continue to do that.
Well, listen, Mark, I really appreciate you sharing that, because I agree. I mean, we're storytellers. This is about human beings and human stories, and real struggles, and oftentimes victories. But sometimes it's really, really tough out there. So I want to just thank you for sharing that personal issue. So Mark Madrid, Associate Administrator of the Office of Entrepreneurial Development at the Small Business Administration. I hope you'll come back. You're fun. I want to thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you, and best success on the Small Business Summit. We're hopeful, but also empathetic, and that's the key to our success overall. Thank you.